Hi, Greg and Robyn McKewin. We're the legacy pastors of HopeUC Port Stephens.
And we began that campus back in March 2002.
Well, I felt like God challenged me to think about church planting, and so over quite a few years I was 2IC at Macquarie Life Church, and we're starting to talk about church planting as a church organisation, and I was never in the mix of the conversations that were about church planting, but I was always in the team, the executive team that was planning. And then I just felt one day to talk to Mark Zare, his senior pastor at that stage, about potentially considering church planting. And he wasn't really for the idea at the time. And so we just sat on that for 6 months, I guess. God accelerated things, and until the point where we were talking about planting a church at Port Stephens. And I needed God's confirmation on that. It had to be a God thing. I didn't want to do it out of my own flesh. And I had to have my wife and my family completely on board.
And can I just add there, I was so not on board.
Yeah.
I was very reluctant, not interested actually.
Yes.
I was just leading kids ministry at Macquarie and quite happy with that. So it freaked me out a little bit. So Greg went and did his whole prayer and fasting thing at Nelson Bay and asked me to pray about it at the same time at home.
Yep.
And I did. And God did an amazing turnaround. He really changed my heart. And so by the time we got back together, I was on board, wasn't I?
Yep.
So that was a miracle there, right there and then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was also our kids as well. They had to be 100% on board. Otherwise, God had to do a miracle there too, because there was a little bit of resistance, obviously drawing kids out of a very strong church to plant a church which was nothing into a place that we didn't really know. Yeah. So God did that as well, which was lovely. So we did want to plant a church that we really wanted to be a part of and go to. Probably the components were a life-giving, grace-filled church. The other thing that really impacted me over the years was I read a book by a guy called Jerry Cook. It was from the 70s, and it's called Love, Acceptance, Forgiveness. And it really touched me, just the grace and the love and the acceptance and forgiveness we have to have as Christians, which is absolutely from God, because we can't do it out of ourselves, out of our natural man. And so probably that was a core philosophy for our church in the early days, and still was all the way through. Often those words would be repeated in new people's gatherings, and they go, "Oh, we just feel a love, acceptance, forgiveness." You go, "Really? That's amazing." So that was key to what the sort of church we wanted to be a part of and lead. So,
can I just add? We actually got saved at Macquarie Church. We haven't been Christians all our life. So we only knew the DNA of a vibrant, grace-filled church, which Mark and Roz led. So it was kind of a natural thing that when we planted, we birthed something very similar to what we knew. So we didn't kind of have a lot of other stuff to get rid of. We only knew this fresh approach to church, and that's what I think we wanted to plant in the Bay, something different, something a bit more vibrant and life-filled.
My background, I'd been a part of a mainstream church, and I felt like it was quite religious the way it approached our Christianity. And so that's what I knew when we planted. I didn't want to be like that. And so I got good at identifying religious spirits pretty quickly, and particularly as a small church, you just have to, and because it bounds people up, it bounds a congregation up actually if there's too much of that in place, and so we just didn't want that as part of the way we led and what we wanted to be part of. So
it's just so important to have that in your heart, to have that grace thing, because in the early days you're new to the area, people come, they got their plans, they got their ministries, they want to tell you how to do church, and I found that really difficult in the early days. So we had to keep coming back to that call of God in us and what we felt He wanted, not what other people wanted. So that was quite a thing to stand strong, wasn't it, in the early days?
Yep, it was very tough sometimes, but it brought value, like it in terms of our church as a freedom.
There was, and there still is there for it. That freedom there is
that's
there.
right. So,
Yeah, we have 4 children. Our son at that stage was at university and he was doing his own thing really and decided he didn't really want to move to the Bay. But we had 3 teenage daughters. What were they, about?
Tristan was 14.
14 and 12 I think they were. And they loved their youth group. 2 of them did school in Newcastle. So in the early days, they weren't that keen to leave everything they knew and to move to the Bay. But Macquarie had a really strong youth group. And in the very early days of the church, we had a young teacher from St Philip's very keen to get involved with the church and build the youth. So Greg suggested he take our girls and a few others that they had attracted down to Macquarie every Friday night and get a sense of what we were trying to build. And it was fabulous in one way, because it kept the girls going, but it kept their heart torn between the two. And I think one time that Friday night, oh my gosh, we must have went down to Newcastle and we picked them up and they were really quiet in the back seat. And they were just, their hearts were just broken that they had to leave Macquarie. They were trying really hard, but it was just like, we looked at each other and thought, what have we done? Like that 14-year-old time is so important for young people. And we thought, what have we done to them? But God got hold of them. And there
was tears. All of us were crying. It was just like,
it was very sad.
What have we done? And, you know, it's one of those things as a dad, you want the best for your kids. And particularly in a Christian context, you want them to be the part of a great youth group. You want them to be part of a great church. You just want it all to be positive. So that residue is in them. And so that was part of the deal with God, I guess, when we planted. It's like, God, you've got to look after my kids. I'm not sacrificing my kids on the altar. No. This will not be about that. No. And he
looked after them so beautifully.
Yeah.
We didn't have much of a team. We had a team that came with us for 6 months, was it?
So we were the first couple to plant a church out of Macquarie. There was no resourcing for church planting when we were doing that. In 2002, it was just nothing around. I think the first church planting seminar I went to was 12 months after we planted. It wasn't that helpful at that stage because I realised all the things we'd done wrong. Macquarie had never done it. Mark Zare had never done it. We were just, we're guinea pigs in some ways. And so basically we planted with a team of 12 adults that committed for 6 months to do the plant to Nelson Bay, and they'd travel up every week because we didn't know anyone in the Bay really. We knew one couple, I think, and we grew to know a few. But so they came every week, travelled up, did church, set up, packed down, went home. It was a huge Sunday.
Out of the trailer.
Nice. Out of the trailer.
We had a trailer. Church was a trailer because in the early days we hired Tomaree Primary Hall.
Yeah, education centre.
And that was back in the days of the blue light discos. Do you remember the blue light discos? And often on a Saturday night, they'd had a disco there and the place was kind of trashed and we'd have to come in on Sunday, set up church, do the whole works.
Or an 18th or a 21st or whatever.
Funny.
Before.
Funny when you look back now, but church was in a trailer and I think that trailer's still parked up there.
It is,
And out came the sound system, out came everything. And we even had creche in the back of the trailer.
They wouldn't give us any other buildings. It was like, what are we going to do? We can put the little kids, and so we made it set up in the back of the trailer with all paintings on the inside.
People
and
can't
steps
believe
up
we did
and,
that, but we did.
So funny times.
But we didn't have much of a music team. Macquarie resourced us a little bit. Tristan at that time had done a bit of singing at youth. She suddenly became our worship leader. She was 14 years old.
Yeah.
Claire, one of our twins, said, Dad, I'll play bass guitar if you'll buy me a guitar, if you'll teach me. So there was some very quick lessons going on. She became the bass guitarist. I think Sophie was a singer. We had some local rock and roll drummer boy that arrived from somewhere.
I qualify that. He was a punk rock band.
He heard about
in a
church.
noisy, bouncy hall. It wasn't fun when he played, but...
So early days, like, don't despise the day of small beginnings. People were just like, yep, I'll have a go. And we did. Greg was on guitar.
Look, it sounds funny. It sounds like a comedy, actually. You get there early, you set up, You check all the things, you make sure the sounds work. And there was other people there, but often they'd say, Greg, what do we do about this? And you go, oh gosh. So you'd be setting all that, make sure the sound's working, make sure the data projector's working, make sure that, then you'd play guitar, then you'd preach. Often Robyn would host, then she'd go out and do kids' church. And
then we pack up
and then run away exhausted at the end of Sunday.
But that's what you did.
And
That's what you did. But God knew, and he so has honoured that. And that can-do spirit, we're just roll up your sleeves type of people, and that's what has built the church with, God working through us. But I still see it in the people. We tended to attract people like that. If you were a bit precious and you didn't want to do much around that, you didn't last very long at Bay Life. I don't reckon.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
I reckon the people that are solid and still there are the ones that just got in and saw that, this is what you do when you're around here. You just get in and, so.
All right, so we identified very early that we wanted to have our own building, our own property. And so we started taking building offerings from year one. Like, this is a batch of people who don't know us, don't trust us, really, and yet they're attending our church and they're helping out in some instances. But from year one, we took up a building offering. I think the first building offering was like $7,000 and $5,000 was from one guy. And it was like, okay, this is going to take a little bit of work, but 4 years in, we identified a property, which is where our current church is.
Yep.
And it took a year of process to get that. And we didn't have any funds for it. So we needed a miracle from God. And in the end, we ended up selling our family home to purchase the property for the church. And basically just had an agreement in place for 5 years that the church would purchase off us at this price we bought it at in 5 years' time. It didn't look like that would ever happen because we were struggling so much financially to make all this happen. But God honoured it, and it was almost to the day, 5 years, the church purchased the property off us at the price we bought it at. And at that stage, we'd built an auditorium, cash only, no mortgage on that at all. We opened on our 10th birthday, so about 5 years is the year we bought it, and then it took us about 5 years to build the auditorium. But all our people built the thing. We had some help from outside, but basically our people built it with their funds. It was an amazing sacrifice on their behalf. And at the end of that time, we had enough equity in it to get a mortgage on the property so the church could buy that office. And it's a stunning example of God's grace and people's faithfulness to God and sacrifice and all that. So,
can I just add, it was a rundown old swim centre. That auditorium was not an auditorium. Where the current kids' church is on the end was a line dancing hall. Beautiful timber floors. And that's where we first had church, in there. We squeezed in there and we built a stage, and that all happened there.
It was chaos.
And the kids were out the back.
Nuts.
But that auditorium that you see now, where you're all sitting, was a huge swimming pool with a rusty old roof from the chlorine had eaten it all away, and everyone wanted to keep it as a big baptismal. We did some great baptisms there. The youth group had dive-in movies. They had a big screen, and it was fun for a while. And then we emptied out the water, and then it became a giant skateboard park. Chris and all these mates are like, "Yay, let's do this." Then we had to fill, and so underneath where everyone sits is the swimming pool. And there were a Christian couple that owned the property, and it was a handshake deal. And they said, "Give us whatever money you got and pay us in 12 months, what the rest of it." Like, go figure. That was a God thing. And we lived in the house that is currently the offices there. And that was interesting, living, working, breathing church for all those years. But it was fun.
It was fun initially. After 3 years, it was starting to get a bit tough. But, but no, it was amazing. So we had working bee after working bee after working bee virtually every second weekend, really. And it was good times.
So. Yeah, but and that auditorium that there is now Greg had pictures of that printed in his office at home for years, and I see it, he said, because it's interesting with vision. The board we had at the time at the school wanted to have a church in a different area in the Bay, and we found this property and we walked there and we just said, this is it, this is what we want. We saw a church where kids could run and kick a ball and play, a family thing. It's very much a family to us, but a few guys on the board said, no one's ever going to want to go out there. No, and it actually caused quite a division and people left the church, but that's what vision does, it divides. And those that were on board with us came with us. And it's now we look out there and it almost makes me cry every time I see that grass, kids playing footy, and it's like, that's what we saw when it was an old swim centre. So it does your heart, good to see it there now.
Yeah, we both can still get emotional, walk out the back and look back and go, wow. Look what God's done. It's amazing. And faithful people, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
When I was doing because I didn't have anything to do with church planning, I did a lot of reading, and it became clear to me church planning is the greatest form of evangelism ever. It's the best form of evangelism ever. And so I got pretty excited about that. And so we really positioned the team who are coming to think about, pray about, consider that. And the funny thing is we're about to launch on this, I think it was the 17th of March in 2002. We did a practice service the week before, but all the brochures had gone out previous to that. And we were doing a full practice service, full setup, music, preaching, the whole lot. And this couple turned up with a family. And I went, what do we do? And I said, okay, come in, sit down. And basically they sat in and Robyn took the kids out to kids' church. And we did just as we do normally. And I thought, why not? I may as well do an altar call and see what happens. And this couple got saved the week before we started. It was just like, wow, that is stunning, God, and it just gave us faith for what was to come. And so that was just a confirmation, I guess, in God to go, yep, you're on the right track, keep going sort of thing. But gosh, we had, over the years, we've just had, amazing testimonies of salvations, families being saved. Youth just took off. The story about youth, we took a bus down to Macquarie, a 50-seater bus, and we were full before we knew it, taking these kids down to Macquarie. Yeah. And then they transferred into our youth, and we had those crazy days.
There's a lot of fruit from those early days of youth. I think even Clummy was part of that young youth group, and then he has sowed so much into young people, and you see them they're serving, they're the sound guys, they're the musos, and they're all fruit of that youth group.
All our girls married guys from our church too. That was the other thing which God was he set that up really, and so they all married great young men.
And at one stage we had the 3 girls and their 3 now husbands all in ministry, leadership at Bay Life at one stage. It was amazing. They were great support actually. And they still are. They're not all part of it now, but they're all in their own churches and doing well.
And I remember when the first one of our kids said, oh, look, we're going to move to Sydney. And I was like, oh gosh, I want to do church with my family. It was like, do I want to do this, without my family? And of course I did, but it was just a question I had to ask, because I really love the church family. It really, for us, it really is a family in many ways. So,
because we're a bit of a holiday destination, and a lot of the young people did get saved there, but they grew up.
Yes.
And often we had to say goodbye to a lot of them because they went to university or went elsewhere. But what is lovely, because a lot of them still have family in the Bay, and whenever they're home on holidays, back they come, and it's like your kids have come home. And they're not even my own, they're spiritual children, but they just love it. And now they're having babies and they're bringing their family back. So we're beginning to see the generation. So they may not be living in the Bay, but they often say to us, this is always our home church, which is lovely. So that's really special.
It is. Yeah, we were struggling to get the auditorium built. We bought the property, we were renovating everything, but we wanted to build this auditorium. And it was about 2 years in, it was like, I don't know how to do this. I can't see how we're ever going to break out of this cycle. We're just making ends meet. And we had an opportunity. Robyn went to Uganda with Watoto. And we had an opportunity to build Watoto Children's Home. And it was like, wow, can we raise that sort of money? And it was just something in God when you give away something that gives you nothing back. I mean, it gives you something back, I guess, in one way, but nothing physical, nothing that's going to help in terms of our financial woes at that stage. So we built this children's home in Watoto, and that was fantastic, and people rallied around that and did great. Then we had an opportunity to build a orphans and widow home in the Philippines.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was sort of on the back of this when, oh gosh, this is silly to do this really in the natural, but it felt the right thing God to do. So we sowed into that and sowed financially and sent a team over, and I went over and I remember in the conversation with them saying, what's your big need now we've got that done? They saw our youth. We just haven't got anything for our youth. We don't know how to nurture them and mentor them and all that. So I said, well, what about if I brought a team back next year and we did a youth conference? And I think this was maybe 2009. That would make sense. And so I brought a team of about 10 or 12 young people and adults and a band, and we preached and did seminars and for a whole week and paid for it all. And it was like, it felt like we were running on the spot in some ways, and then all of a sudden something broke loose, and I don't know what it is or how to explain it, but all of a sudden we started to get funds from people were giving more significant amounts. People were coming in with skills that we needed to do the auditorium, and within 2 years, on our 10th birthday, we opened the auditorium without a mortgage on it, we had a mortgage on the property, but we built that with the cash we got from
And remember,
offerings.
we opened with the Watoto Children's Choir.
We had the children's choir, yes,
We
that's
wanted
right.
somewhere decent
Yes.
to have them, not in the little tiny line dancing hall. So that only made sense then when you said that.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
started with the Watoto giving the home, and then God just did the...
And we'd since done a youth conference. We couldn't pull it off every year, but we pull it off every second year ever since. So, and I think HopeUC has actually agreed to fund one of those in the coming months, which is fantastic. So it continues on, I guess. But in the natural, can I say, it made no sense at all. It made no sense to be sowing into these things that didn't look like they'd help us build our auditorium, which is what we'd like. But I remember God saying, no, just build the people and they'll build the auditorium. And part of the faith that got built in people in that process, I think got outworked in the building of our auditorium as we did those sorts of things. So,
So, and the Philippines one was a big one. But for me, community-wise, I was kind of more, I loved the church and was working and sewing in there, but my heart was local community. I was always trying to liaise community. And back in 2009, we set up this program. It was called Mainly Music back then, but it was just a music program for under fives, for parents, mostly mums, but sometimes dads as well. And we launched that because that was our inroad into the community. 14 years later, it is going, and it morphed very quickly. It turned into a bit of a more what I was like, I suppose, rather than the instrument I started with. So it's now Music and Moves. And it's been fabulous. Fabulous. It's called often parents will say, oh, it's like going to a Wiggle show, because it kind of had a bit more life in it than whatever. But great team, and we had back-to-back, we still have back-to-back Fridays, two groups running with a big morning tea in the middle, because we went big. I don't do anything by halves. Go big if you're going to go big. And I still run into mums and dads in the community, kids that were 3 are now 15, and they still talk about music. And
are now in our youth group. Often you find,
they are.
That's who's there. It's amazing.
And Greg used to say to me, if I got that many calls about people wanting to know when church is on Sunday, they'd all ring and say, we've heard about your music group, can we come on Friday? He said, people just don't ask, can I come to church? But for them, we were church. And it left a positive flavour of church in them. And often I had that lovely privilege of when the mums were struggling or something had gone down in the family, we're the first ones they open up to, and we would love on them and feed them.
Yeah.
We were pastoring them. They didn't know that.
No, they wouldn't have called it that.
And I never once had to advertise, had to kind of stop them. We had waiting lists. So many people wanted to come. So for me, that was a really positive experience, and I'm pleased it's still going. I don't know how long it'll go for, but it's still going to this day. So.
Yeah, that's a fantastic
that was a great
thing.
inroad into the community.
Oh, it's amazing. The other thing that we did establish from the early years, actually the first year we went to the States and did a training for facilitation for a marriage course over there, brought it back to Australia. Didn't quite work the way we were hoping in Australia, so we reworked it and launched a thing called Fall in Love, Stay in Love, and basically worked in our church. I thought, I wonder if I can do this, reproduce this in other churches, trained other facilitators in other churches, and it just took off. And we still get people walk up to us these days and go, oh, you're the guys that started Fall in Love, Stay in Love. Well, that's amazing, that course. It saved our marriage, and different testimonies of that. So, and also, it actually worked for community couples as well. It wasn't just for church couples, which I loved. And
look, it's still there. And this is what I love about HopeUC and the way God has interconnected us all. We trained facilitators in Bruce and Kate's church, and we trained them in Megan and Grant's church. And
Macquarie Life too.
And Macquarie, they were all doing Fall in Love, Stay in Love. So there's this beautiful interconnection. It's still there. We just got really tired, and we had so much going on. We didn't have the energy to still put into it, but it's still there. And it's still very much in our hearts. So we're hoping that maybe it'll get revamped and reworked when we kind of refresh ourselves even more.
So we have always had a heart for youth. That's always been, and I'm so pleased to see youth going on strongly. We love that. We've had a strong kids ministry because Robyn was very passionate about kids ministry, a strong youth ministry. And we just believe you need to have all age groups in the church as well. And so I'm loving seeing that still a part of HopeUC. We've got the older than us even, grey parents, grandparents, and you've got the parents, and you've got the young marrieds, and you've got the teenagers and the young kids. And I guess that was part of our strategy handing over the church and merging with HopeUC, I guess, is that we realised we were getting a bit older than was probably ideal. And we wanted to attract a lot more young people and young families. So that was probably that part of that. So I'm loving seeing that after 2 years of being out of that sort of thing, seeing that become evident, So, for us, one of the things we always dreamed we might do is build a wedding chapel on site. And again, it may or may never happen, I guess. But it was something that we just felt, I guess because of our connection to marriage too, maybe that was why it was such a driver for us. But just thought that was such a perfect opportunity to reach into our community and connect with people, that there's a need for them to connect. It's not just you need to come to church. It's like, no, let's resource your marriage. I mean, my stance on marriage was I wouldn't just marry anyone. They had to do a course, pre-marriage course, and we'd often do Prepare, Enrich or multiple other courses. I didn't feel it was fair just to throw them in without any of that preparation. And often they said, well, we won't get married by you. Then I went, that's fine. So that's probably one of the things, just to see the church grow. Our mission statement was, for us at the time, was to reach and positively influence our community and world by building a significant church that loves God, loves people, and loves life. And just to see that outworked in real time is just delightful for us as the co-founding pastors, I guess, of the original church. So
and for me, I think the position on that main road is something quite significant. I feel like I just want the church to continue to be like a lighthouse almost, a beacon of hope, and that people can just walk in, that they'll never feel those barriers that sometimes we can put up, that it's just an open door and welcoming arms to whoever wants to walk through that door. And I know I sense that with HopeUC, and that's just wonderful. And I just hope that continues beautiful welcome that, we need to give people as they find Jesus.
Yeah, yep. Now that's pretty much what we're seeing happening these days. You know, it's life-giving, grace-filled. You know, there's joy there. There's the messiness of family and kids and all that, but that's joyful as well. And we don't want to get caught up in the other stuff at all. So, yeah.
Legacy to me is something that you're leaving, I suppose, not a footprint, but something you've left behind. And for me, yes, it's the building and all, that's all nice, but it's the heart of the church. And yes, we've talked a lot about family and life. Yeah, I just never want to see that life go out of the church.
No.
That would be the legacy I would want to see, the love and life and light continue.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's that non-religious spirit, I guess, is what I would hope our legacy is, that, you know, that you just want freedom. When we understand what our Christianity does for us and the freedom it brings, you just have to shed all that other stuff that might have held us back over the years. And it's a process. It's not there's a one-off, you know, part of it, but then there's this process, this journey. And it's very much a faith journey, and it's not always straightforward as we'd like it to be. But you know, the legacy we hope we bring is that grace, that, I guess, that humility, I guess, of spirit, that you know, God can do it. We can't always do it, but God can do it, and it's believing and having that faith stance in that process, and seeing the young people we've raised up. Gosh, that is such a blessing. Seeing, you know, they're in ministry, like Chris is leading, and with Tristan, our daughter, and you know, young Matt leading worship, and you know, Beck involved in the team as well, and just seeing, I mean, way beyond that, there's so many more that I could, but so many of them have come through and now serving God in a significant way. It's very exciting and very, I don't know, humbling to see that as well.
Of how when we were struggling with the whole financing, the property and the building, and the council was on our back because we're on the main road, right? And there was always talk about, what was those, one of those lanes? No, I'll get it right. Just tell me what those lanes are.
Yeah, deceleration lanes.
Deceleration lane.
Yep.
Had to come in from the left, and the quote was like enormous. It was enormous. It was $180,000 or something, and then we had to put a deposit down equal to the same much. We didn't have any money, right? And if we didn't do it, they were closing us down. We were already there operating, but they just kept this threat, just kept coming.
It's part of our conditions, and
we'd
they
have
gave
to
us
do
a
this
bit of
road
time
work.
to do that, but
And we knew we could never do it, right? But meanwhile, there was hearsay that they would do the road up one day. But one day, we never knew when that was, but it got pretty desperate. And God just brought the right person one day to Greg's office and just said, "You're not going to have to do that road work." And he said, "You don't get it." "Yes, we do." And he said, "No, you don't." He said, "I know what's coming." And the road was coming through, or blah, blah, whatever.
The dual lanes.
The dual lanes were coming. But this guy said, "Hold off, don't do a thing," because we'd already paid to have all that, the surveys, and that was a big enough stretch. So the road did come through, but we got paid, right? They took some of our land where the old office was. They bought a strip of land to put the road on. So they gave us money.
Did the road work.
And we were able to do the work. Whereas it was looking like we had to shut the doors. We just couldn't do it. And so they paid us.
God's timing. And the guy who turned up worked for the RMS, and he was a Christian, and it was just like,
He just said, "No, you don't have to do this." So it was like an angel.
Can you give me a letter with that written down, because I can't see how that's going to work, and it did.
So what a turnaround! It's just one of the most amazing miracles ever.
Yeah.
So that's all tied up in how that property came to be.
It is. Yeah. And so Bruce Robbo is very unique, and so we I loved having him on the board just to give a different perspective and a different conversation really from the guys I had. And I guess we've had a great friendship over the years, and in fact, he was pretty significant in my salvation, to be truthful. He, because he was from a business background at that stage, I was in business at the time, and he basically, I don't know, he just drew me in a little bit with his business acumen, I guess, from the past, and so from day one we hit it off. Our kids were very similar ages. We went away camping with all our kids. Like Bruce and I took the kids away, and there's some great stories about that Beth wouldn't appreciate if I told. But it was just great times, and so I came in under him when I came on staff at Macquarie, and he went out and took over the church at Gateshead and redid that with the team. So we've had great relationship over many, many years.
And those girls, I just can't believe, I keep shaking my head trying to work out how Bethany Robbo, Rebecca Zare and Tristan McKewin were all best friends at high school, grew up together in the same youth group, are all in key leadership in HopeUC with the most amazing husbands.
Yes.
It's like God has just drawn the dots. It's just amazing, isn't it? I cannot believe it.
It is.
And when we went to the Legacy dinner a couple of years ago, we felt like we were just amongst family.
Yeah, we came home.
We came home. It was just because I said to Greg, I'm not going to know anybody. And walked in the room, and it felt like, oh my gosh, we just all together. So it's a beautiful thing, and that's how we knew it was the right thing to hand over to HopeUC.